And you too could be making horsepower with the turbo from Force Performance. Is that how it's supposed to work? Just a reminder, everyone, our giveaway is live. So if you're interested in getting entered to win our Force Performance Turbo or any of the other packages we're giving away, the link is in the bio. This video is going to be a little bit different because part of it was shot in the past and part of it is being shot now. And big reason was we were waiting for a crank. So we got one and now it's time to slap this motor together. How to rebuild your Subaru motor the wrong job the right way. We are going to be doing this in a way that isn't by any stretch of the imagination the proper way, but we're going to go through new bearings, new rings, go through, make sure everything's proper, reseal the whole motor, go back through, and it will be a fresh sealed motor. We are not going to do any machine work on the block itself. We are not getting rid of the pistons, rods, crank. All of that stuff is going to be used unless when we get in here we find out wherever we have our bearing problem, there's actually an issue. If that's the case, then we will end up scrapping this whole project and having to rebuild this motor for real. But it was such a small knock, I'm gonna guess that it's from, you know, an oil pump that was not pumping properly. So I'm hoping that this goes pretty easy. You got your short block on the stand here. Go ahead, clean this thing up to the best of your abilities. It is 16 below outside right now, and I'm still in here cleaning it. You guys, if you have a garage, there's no reason you can't get your garage warmed up enough to just degrease this motor. The big reason behind that is when you set this on the table, you do not want to tear it apart and be putting it back together and having greasy, oily, dirty stuff contaminating the rotating assembly of your motor. So we're gonna go ahead and keep scrubbing this thing down, and then we're gonna go ahead and I got a little mini pressure washer I'll show you guys in a little bit that we'll be using that works great when you don't have a lot of water to use and you don't want to make a big mess inside. This is a little cleaning tool I use for small little areas. Basically, it comes with a siphon hose. You hook this into a bucket, you hook an air compressor up to it, and it shoots out a pressurized mist. And you can clean stuff with it, and it doesn't use a ton of water. You know, I start with like a gallon, and I can clean like a whole motor with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and spray everything off with this, and then we'll go ahead and start tearing this motor down. Alright guys, so we got our case halves split over here. We have a good look at our main bearings, which I will show you guys in just a minute here. But at this point, we have a pretty good look at what's going on with the motor. This motor was coming apart because it was a little intermittent knock that we were hearing, and we were fairly confident it was going to be a bearing. So at this point, all of our main bearings, they actually look pretty good. We don't have any real bad failures or anything like that. There's a little bit of scoring from it being a higher mile motor, but there's absolutely nothing that would be not usable at this point. Obviously, when we go back together with this thing, it's going to have new bearings and everything going back into it. But at this point, these components look good. So the next thing we're going to start looking at is the crank, and then we're going to pull apart our connecting rod bearings and actually take a look at those, which is typically where you would see a failure on a Subaru. We're going to tear apart the crank and connecting rods, and I guess we'll see what we have going on once we get those torn apart. I thought I would just take a second here to show you guys the bearings here. They look fairly good. You start getting closer up to the front of the motor and they have a little bit more of a beating on them, but still in very, very good shape considering it's damn near a 200,000 mile motor. Okay, so we have our crank in the vise now. This is typically how I go about pulling apart the connecting rod bearings. And you just get it in here to a point where you aren't cranking it down and pinching anything, but you're holding it in here firmly. So we'll just go ahead and just pop the fasteners loose. Once they're loose, we can actually do this on the table. Alright, so we'll go ahead and set this back down, and we will go ahead and pull these apart and take a look at our bearings. So I'll actually take out on the table here, and I'll mark out exactly where the crank is so we can take and keep track of the connecting rods and the bearings that come out of them, just for future diagnosis if we find something that is actually more catastrophic than just a spun bearing. So the crank took a beating. It's not terrible by any means, but as far as me being able to put it together and say this should run for a long time, I don't have that confidence in this crank. So this is cylinder 1's connecting rod bearings. Let's see if you guys can see any of this. Pretty well beat, and to the point where they no longer fit into the connecting rod whatsoever. Very, very loose, as in they've been beat pretty hard for a while now. Alright guys, so here's the deal. We got Donovan's motor torn down. This is out of his 2009 Forester. This is an NA motor, nothing that crazy. This is our old crank. There's a couple journals on here that have some excessive wear on them. So we just decided to throw a new crank at it. It's a lot easier than trying to go the route of having it cut, get new bearings, having to measure everything out. So everything is going back together with OEM specs at this point. We are going to be using this brand new crank. Since we could not find a EJ 253 crank, which is what the crank would be that came out of his car, we ended up getting Donovan a nitrated EJ 257 crank. So this is a definite upgrade, and it is definitely overkill for what we're doing here. But this is a Ford's factory EJ 257 crank, and this is the crank we're going to be using in this thing. So going forward, we're going to go ahead and pull all of the bearings out of the block, and then we are going to start working on getting bearings back in this thing. In this case, since we're going back to all stock factory specifications, we won't end up having to measure anything. This will be a pretty cut and dry setup. If you were building a turbo motor, I would not tell you to go this route of, just throwing it together whatsoever. But being as this is naturally aspirated, and like I said, we are going back to all factory specifications as far as bearings and everything like that, we are just going to put it together, put new bearings in it, and assemble the thing. So that's what we're going to start working on now. I'm going to pop all these bearings out of this block, and we're going to clean up all the journals, clean up all the block surfaces, get everything absolutely perfect, and then we are actually going to run a type of hone through these cylinders. And stick around, I'm going to show you guys exactly what we're going to do with that. Before I get started here, something I'm just going to go ahead and throw out there. This is just preference. This is something I like to do. I like to keep everything in the order it came apart, just in case for some reason down the line you'd need to figure something out. You'll have your bearings all in order. So I'll actually go ahead and lay each case half in its own line in order, so just in case I have all the original stuff. So this is my 99.75. Sorry about the heater. I'm just going to let this thing run. But this is our 99.75 flex hone, ball hone, dingle ball hone. They call them all sorts of different things. Basically, this is just going to add a little bit of cross hatching back into the cylinders. It's not going to cut cylinders or anything like that. It's going to just be something that is kind of just a quick freshen up of the cylinders. I'm going to go ahead and put this on a drill, and then I will actually take and just put some oil on the cylinders, and we are going to run this through the cylinders just to freshen them up. The cylinders look pretty good, but this is just going to add a little bit of cross hatching back into them, which in return will help with oil consumption and things like that. Nice and lubricated. We will take this drill. It's on level 1, speed 1 I should say. Now, something I will note is at the top of these cylinders, they are tapered for the piston ring. Do not go and try to, go to the top of the cylinder, or you will wreck the taper on the top of the bore, and it will definitely cause problems. So go right past that, just go and stay in the bottoms of the bores here, which is where the piston rings spend most of their life. Now that that is got a nice little bore on it, a hone I should say, we will go ahead and take a clean rag here, and wipe down both of them. It does not take much to get these things to have some beautiful cross hatching in them, and too much takes material off and actually can cause failures and issues like that. Something that we're going to be doing here is going through and gapping piston rings. So that's a big reason why we do that, is because if one of these bores was not perfectly concentric with the other one, then we would be able to take and adjust that in the piston ring gap. Alright guys, so I know it's really hard to see here, but these are the bores before I have done any honing whatsoever. And then here are the bores after I honed them. So you guys can see the beautiful cross hatching in there that leaves, and basically makes it so we will have a nice piston ring seal and not have any oil consumption. Alright, let me level with y'all. This is a boring video, I know it is. This is not something that's fun. For you giveaway people that are watching this, you're getting rewarded right now. Here's an Easter egg for you. Boostin'89, all caps, and I swear to you it'll work. Thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it. Stick around to the end, maybe, possibly. Alright, let's do it. Alright, blue Scotch Brite pad. This is our polishing pad. We're gonna go ahead and clean all these mounting surfaces up. That's our starting point. We'll clean everything up. Do not touch any of the journals where the bearings are. Just clean the surfaces up here. Alright guys, so you can see I went ahead and I cleaned up the surfaces of the block. I got everything nice and clean, polished up. Looks delicious, right? So the big thing is you want to stay out of the journals. Just make sure you're not going in here and doing anything. This will mess everything up. Secondly, so after we get to this point, you guys can see some of the areas that had, you know, all these surfaces have RTV on them. Something we're going to want to do is make sure we're going through and knocking off everything on the edges, especially on the inside of the block, to make sure we don't have any contamination. Another thing, inside these holes, you can't really see, but there is RTV in here because this gets sealed. You won't want to dig that out. Make sure we're not getting any invalid torque numbers. So inside of all these, we're going to get all the RTV out of the holes before we go past this point. We're going to wipe this down again, but we're going to wait until we're actually ready to assemble this. We're going to jump over to the vise right now, and we are going to start working on that new crank we've got and getting connecting rods hooked up and torqued down on there. Alright guys, so here is our brand new nitrated crank. We are going to go ahead and go through this thing and basically clean all the journals of the assembly oil that came on them, the packaging oil, so they don't rust. Clean everything perfectly off. Get all of the dust and dirt and debris off of this thing, and get this thing ready for assembly. Just remember, the cleaner you are now, the longer and better this motor is going to be running. So basically, just take your time here, get everything perfectly clean. If you guys can see those numbers there. And the other side is not. There's also a logo right there. And the other side, there's not. That logo needs to face towards the harmonic balancer. The crank pulley needs to go towards the front of the motor, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's how these things are balanced. There's only one way that these bearings can go in place. If you can see, there is a tang on the end of the bearing here. Small tang on the connecting rod. Basically set the tang in its home and then slide the bearing in. But before we do that, we're going to wipe off the connecting rod or the bearing both sides. Wipe this back out again, make sure all of our surfaces are perfectly clean. Put it in its home. Put it in its home. Now you can see it's in there. So same thing on the rod cap. This is where you get messy. This is Permatex Ultra Slick, and we will be using this for our assembly lubricant. So this stuff comes out very thick. So you are going to get a little oil on each surface. We're going to take and get this stuff all spread out on here. Get this journal all lubricated. It's important that you put some lubricant on the threads of the connecting rod also. Now that this is a assembly, everything is the way it needs to be. The logo is going to go towards the front. So basically we are going to install this thing just like this. That goes on there, that goes on there. Then we take our bolts, or our nuts, and alright guys, so we've got the connecting rods all on the crank here. Everything is just snugged down at this point, and we are going to go ahead and work on actually torquing them to the correct torque spec so we can get this thing installed. So the thing I will say about this is the torque spec is 38.4 foot-pounds. So basically you can go through and torque this down, 38.4, done, right? No. So basically the best practice here is we're gonna go ahead and set it to like half of the torque. And we are going to go and tighten everything to 20 foot-pounds. Okay, so then we are going to go through and we are just going to just crack everything a little bit loose. Take a quarter turn off. Now what you've done is you've seated the bearing all the way. You've got everything tightened down, and then you've loosened it back up so you can get a correct torque spec. So the next step here, we're going to go to 24 foot-pounds, somewhere in there, and torque everything back down. Now we're going to go through, we'll bump it up to our 38.4 foot-pounds, and we are going to tighten it. If this was a built motor, we would do that step twice, and then we would tighten it. And that's not the torque spec for a built motor either, so. We are going to go ahead and start working on getting the two case halves ready to go. So I wiped everything down again, got all the surfaces clean here. So we're going to go ahead and take some of these O-rings. These O-rings go directly into these holes in the block. And then we have an orange one that'll go here. So when we go ahead and put all this RTV on here, which will be one of the later steps here, the big thing to remember is that we will be going and we'll add RTV in here in the bottom, and then we'll be going all the way up and around. So we'll come and making sure we are staying 100% clear of the journals on the crank. It's very important because if you get too much RTV in here, it'll actually smush into the bearings, and this we've actually seen motors consume themselves inside of the break-in period from improper assembly from another shop. So we'll start with some bigger bearings here. Same deal. The journals are nice and clean. Go ahead and line your tang up. Press it in place. Same thing over here. Line your tang up. Press it in place. And then we will need a smaller set now. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and apply our RTV here. So I use right stuff for everything. We're going to go ahead and make sure we got some nice clean stuff that wasn't in the nozzle for a long time. We're just going to go ahead and start working our way around this thing and more or less just get this thing sealed up. The next move is going to be going and lubing these bearings up, making sure you have all the RTV off your fingers so there's no contamination. And then you're going to obviously want to go and check all your RTV spots, make sure everything still has sufficient RTV where it needs to, so we can make sure we don't have any seal or any issues. Alright, so then we're going to put the bolts in here and cinch this thing down. Pretty simple setup. Obviously, we're just going to put some bolts in. Obviously, these ones will end up getting put in too. So the biggest thing to remember is on the block bolts, you have these replaceable O-rings. They're O-ring washers to keep sealed. So make sure you replace these. So we went ahead and torqued all this stuff down. Camera ended up running out of power, and I didn't realize we were not recording for the end of half the clip. So this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D. So in alphabetical order, it'll be A, B, C, D. 7.4 foot-pounds. And then when you go to the other side, E, F, G, H, I, and then up here is J. These will be 7.4 foot-pounds. So then you're going to go through and tighten A, B, C, D, you know, all the way on all the bolts to 13.4 foot-pounds again. And then after you've gone around and done that, on this side of the block, you will be doing A and C. You'll be putting 90 degrees on top of that. And then B and D out here, you will be tightening those down to 29.5 foot-pounds. And then on this side of the block, you'll just go again. And you'll put 90 degrees on all of those. And then for the last part, we will be doing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then this is the very bottom. This is letter H. So A through G get torqued to 18.4 foot-pounds, and then the bottom one, H, ends up getting torqued down to 4.7 foot-pounds. So 4.7 foot-pounds on H, and then 18.4 foot-pounds on A through G. And do it in that order, and you will be done. That's it. That's it for putting the actual short block rotating assembly together. Alright guys, I hope you're enjoying this video, learning something from it, and I hope you're planning your next project. This shouldn't be anything that you guys should be scared from. This just takes basic tools. There really isn't anything that special to get this job done, and you will be able to build a motor. One day you'll be able to build a built motor. This will be something that you'll be hopefully working towards. I hope you guys understand that nothing other than your guys' patience and your guys' attention to detail and some basic hand tools, and you can go ahead and build yourself a motor. Alright guys, make sure you're sticking around for the next one. I know this isn't the most fun video ever, but I promise you there's a lot of good information in here. I wouldn't be posting these videos if someone didn't stand to learn something from it. One of the biggest misconceptions about this industry is that you have to be a professional to have nice things. And I'm here to tell you, if you work hard, pay attention, and be critical on the details, you too could be building a motor at home for your car, saving yourself thousands of dollars. Don't forget, guys, we're giving away our Force Performance FP Green Turbo. This is absolutely free, and you could be making 400 horsepower on your Subaru and gapping all them Hondas. All you got to do is smash the link below and get entered to win.